Hello everyone and welcome to Day 4 of Access Partnerships Fair Tech Forum. I am Colin Thompson, Head of Access Partnerships Infrastructure Practice. In our Tech Policy Trends for 2021, we asked, is this the year for Open RAN to go mainstream? Today, in this session, we will consider if Open RAN will democratise access to connectivity. Mobile networks support billions of connections, generating hundreds of billions of dollars in service provider revenues annually. These two characteristics establish mobile networks as some of the most important distributed network infrastructure in the world. But while the market for mobile network infrastructure is huge, it is dominated by just a handful of vendors. Open RAN and disaggregated network technologies in general present an opportunity for mobile network operators who purchase this infrastructure to rebalance the market towards open components, giving them greater flexibility and lowering the costs by using commodity hardware. MNOs, along with sector vendors, industry coalitions, investors, and academia, are seeking to put forward an open network, Open RAN, which will develop radio networks, open network, disaggregated hardware components, and software components. Bodies such as the O-RAN Alliance and the Telecom infrastructure are now delivering standards-based technology solutions, specifications, and trials. Access to Open RAN technology also provides a vehicle for MNOs to address supply chain security concerns brought about by heightened trade and security tensions, as well as a chance to develop national telecom champions after a decade of consolidation. Commercially, Open RAN offers a chance to reduce the costs of complying with universal service conditions. A common obligation in MNO's service licenses, universal service requires high-cost equipment to be deployed in low-return areas in return for exclusive use of natural frequencies or resources. Operators are now leveraging Open RAN as a cost-effective way to deliver service. By migrating legacy 2G, 3G, and 4G networks to open architectures, operators are able to reduce their costs and complexity of meeting the universal service obligations in these areas. Having proven the Open RAN technology with select deployments in their 2G to 4G networks, mobile network operators are now leveraging the technology in the rollout of their 5G networks. This trend will increase operators' buying power, drive competition, and result in cost-effective, business-driven solutions to the challenges faced by operators and their clients. So, in summary, Open RAN, open networks, and other open and disaggregated technologies provide a vehicle to foster competition, improve MNO vendor choice, and increase network operational flexibility. It also provides a platform to address heightened trade and security concerns and provides the opportunity for cost-effective, business-driven solutions for mobile network operators. This is being welcomed by governments, MNOs, and consumers globally. And here to help us determine if Open RAN will democratize access to connectivity, I am joined by an excellent lineup of speakers. Our keynote speech will be delivered by Mr. Scott Bailey, Deputy Director of Telecoms Diversification for the UK Department for Culture, Media and Sport. And following from Scott's keynote, we will then have a panel discussion moderated by Dileep Srahiri, Senior Policy Counsel for Access Partnership. Dileep will be joined on the panel by Tom Kutsky, Digital Inclusion Team Lead at USAID's Innovation, Technology and Research Hub, by Michaela Duhat, Director for 5G Policy and External Management with Microsoft, Eugenia Jordan, Vice President of Marketing at Parallel Wireless, and Attilio Zani, Executive Director for the Telecom Infra project. I'd now like to introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Scott Bailey from DCMS in the UK. Enjoy the discussion, and over to you, Scott.
Thanks very much, Colin, and thanks very much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this really important and useful discussion. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Scott Bailey, and I'm the head, as Colin said, of the Telecoms Diversification team in the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport in the UK. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about the strategy that we have set out in the UK in relation to diversity in telecom supply chains and the work that we have underway. And also a little bit about the opportunities that we see for governments, industry, and consumers, which I hope will help to frame some of the conversation that we can then have in our Q&A panel discussion. So here in the UK, we carried out and published our telecom supply chain review way back in 2019. This found that there had been global consolidation in the supply chain for the RAN over the last 15 years or so, and identified the serious resilience implications of this for the UK's critical national infrastructure in telecoms. Of course, different countries are taking their own approaches to the question of high-risk vendors in their network, and the UK's position here is well known. The reality is that all countries are facing limited choices, and from the UK's perspective, we do not think that this leaves us in an acceptable position. So that's why we published the Telecoms diversification strategy at the end of last year, and why the team I lead in DCMS exists. And our strategy is based around 3 strands of work. The first strand is working with our remaining incumbent vendors to ensure, firstly, that they can continue to supply into the UK market, and also that we can begin to align our roadmaps with theirs. The second strand is looking at how we can attract new scale vendors into the UK market in the short to medium term. This includes looking at how we can address some significant barriers to entry, such as setting out an approach to the sunsetting of 2G and 3G legacy networks, as well as aligning our approach on spectrum. We're also exploring where and how we might use commercial incentives. And then the final strand of our strategy is how we can accelerate the development of new open and interoperable technologies like Open RAN. In addition to those 3 areas, we have 2 cross-cutting priorities. Firstly, we're looking at how, as part of this transition, and I'm sure we may come back to this in the discussion, we can develop stronger UK capability in the sector, building on the work that we already have ongoing with our 5G testbeds and trials program. And secondly, how can we look to build international consensus here, noting that the UK is only 2% of the global market, as well as agreeing between like-minded countries some early priorities for action. And I'm pleased to say that all of this is being supported by an initial £250 million of investment by the UK government. So achieving our ambitions will require sustained effort over a number of years and the cooperation of government, industry, university, and many others. In that spirit, in the UK, we set up an independent task force chaired by Ian Livingston, who is a former CEO of BT, that brought together a cross-section of industry and academic experts to give us advice on how to turn our strategy into concrete actions. Their report was published in April and has given us a really rich set of recommendations and actions that will probably keep me and my team busy for quite a few years to come. So if you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to go onto the UK government's website where it's available to read. But the good news is we're already making progress here in the UK. We funded a joint project with Ofcom, which is the UK regulator, and our digital catapult, which is brilliantly named Sonic, to test how to deliver interoperable solutions, which is due to go live next week. And we're really delighted with the number of companies that are already involved in that project. We're also funding a project with NEC here in the UK. And in addition to the public sector-led projects, we're delighted with the confidence that industry is already demonstrating with announcements by Mavenir, Airspan, amongst others, that will establish Open RAN testing facilities here in the UK. And of course, Vodafone made their announcement earlier this week that they will partner with a range of companies, including NEC and Samsung, to deliver their initial Open RAN deployments of 2,500 sites in the UK, in the rural southwest of England and Wales. And I think what this shows is that there is a clear alignment here of objectives between governments and industry. And if we're successful, and obviously that is not going to be easy, then government, industry, and consumers can all benefit. Firstly, because Open RAN offers the potential for more vendors to supply mobile networks, which from the government's perspective, we see as helping to boost the resilience of our networks by reducing the risk of critical national dependence. So here we need to support efforts to do the research and development to address some of the outstanding technical challenges with regards to Open RAN, as well as looking at how we can share and develop best practice in terms of reducing the policy and regulatory barriers. Secondly, we see it as presenting opportunities for new UK companies to enter the market. And I mentioned before the strong theme that we have around building UK capability. which is something that here in the UK government we're really keen to happen and support. Thirdly, it offers the opportunity for operators to roll out their networks in a more flexible and agile way. And lastly, that flexibility and innovation could potentially bring benefits to users by giving them a more adaptive service. So here in the UK, we're working at pace to progress the work and to take forward the recommendations of the Lord Livingston Task Force, and we'll be setting out further steps shortly. We've also been working very closely with other countries to build international understanding, and we had a really good set of initial conversations on this under the auspices of the G7's presidency. But as I said, this is both a really important agenda and one that will require sustained and concerted effort, not just from government, but from industry and academia and others. So it's really great to be here to be part of this discussion, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from others as we take this work forward. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott. Really appreciated those insightful remarks. So as my colleague Colin mentioned, my name is Dilip Shahari, and I am Senior Policy Counsel at Access Partnership based out of our Washington, D.C. office. And I will be moderating the panel discussion that's going to fill the rest of today's event. This is a wonderful panel in that we have the challenge of the pandemic has led to more virtual things. And this is the upside of it because we can have an event that is transcontinental. We have myself based in Washington, my colleague Colin based in London, and our panelists are on both sides of the Atlantic today, which is really wonderful. We'll start with Tom Kautsky from USAID to deliver a few initial thoughts, and then I'll ask Tilio from Telecom Infra Project to go next, followed by Michaela and then Eugenia afterwards. So if each of the panelists could just sort of share some initial thoughts, starting with Tom, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Dilip. And thank you, Access Partnership, for hosting this great event, which is very timely. I'm also pleased on behalf of USAID to follow Scott Bailey of DMCS of the United Kingdom. And I'd like to refer folks to last week's successful G7 summit that was hosted by the United Kingdom. And I'm particularly happy to note that vendor diversity has been a topic of the G7 ministerial meetings over the course of the spring. And in particular, the UK has been a very strong leader and partner in terms of working with the United States, other like-minded countries that share our values with regard to the future of the internet. In particular, the G7 ministerial declaration that came out in April talks about how we can work together as democracies to promote secure, resilient, and diverse digital telecoms and ICT infrastructure supply chains. So I'm very, very pleased to be on this panel with Scott and to be talking about this really important issue today. I work for the United States Agency for International Development. And you might actually be wondering, why is a development agency talking here about telecommunications? USAID, for short, is the world's largest bilateral donor country, providing humanitarian assistance in over 80 and development assistance in over 80 countries in the developing world. And there's a significant developing country opportunity with regard to Open RAN that I know we'll get into a little bit more detail in the question and answer session. But it's important to know that USAID has been involved in expanding access to the internet and growing internet and mobile communications technology for over 25 years. In fact, it was a USAID program that brought some of the very first internet exchange points to sub-Saharan Africa in 1996. More recently, USAID's digital strategy, released last year, articulates that developing an open, inclusive, and secure digital ecosystem, in particular digital infrastructure, is a key component of countries' development. USAID looks at helping countries develop their communications industries. And when we do so, we don't look solely at the physical aspects of the networks, but we also look about how the internet is being used, whether service is affordable, and how we can close substantial digital divides that we see around the world, such as those between women and men, urban and rural populations, and indigenous populations in certain social classes. We believe that for developing countries to grow and thrive in the digital age, they absolutely need to have competitive, inclusive, and widespread access to the internet, and that internet be open, interoperable, reliable, and secure. And also that the internet reflect the values of free speech, democracy, and human rights that we all value and treasure in the West. So why does USAID care about 5G, and why do we care about Open RAN in particular? 5G technology, as you probably no doubt heard several times, is a substantial leap forward in speed, reliability, and capacity. And governments today, even governments that may not even have 3G and 4G networks, the decisions that they're making today on spectrum license rules, cybersecurity, and their supply chain policies all will impact the future deployment of advanced services like 5G and AI. So for this reason, we have engaged with on a project to explore and understand the extent to which Open RAN industry is interested in developing countries, We have actually noted, as will be discussed later, significant interest in greenfield builds in rural areas throughout Africa, places like Indonesia, the Philippines, and in Latin America. And we at USAID are interested in exploring partnerships, figuring out ways to expand access to the internet, because this is an innovative, open, inclusive, and secure systems that can drive down costs and provide opportunities for locally led development. I'll close my opening remarks here by noting as well that it may surprise some people here, but USAID was actually involved in some of the original research into the protocols that are now being used by the Open RAN industry. Almost 10 years ago, in 2012, we provided funding to University of California, Berkeley's Development Impact Lab to develop a technology called Open BTS, or base telecommunication stations. That funding led to the initial trial deployments in the Philippines. The core team from Berkeley was eventually purchased and hired by Facebook. Within a few months later, Facebook founded the Telecom Infrastructure Project, and we find ourselves here today. So while I'm not going, been a number of really important people and geniuses working on Open RAN technology. I do like to say that USAID was perhaps a little bit on the more cutting edge that one would potentially not expect to be from a development agency. So we're hoping now to really accelerate those processes and see what we can do as a development agency to accelerate the adoption and growth of Open RAN technology throughout the world. And with that, I'll turn it back to Dilip.
Really appreciate that. So next up will be Attilio from the aforementioned Telecom Infra project. Thanks, Attilio.
The Telecom Infra project, its genesis was a number of years ago, as you mentioned, and we really have seen an increase in the technology, this equation, rallying very, very swiftly. So the Telecom Infra project, for those that don't know, is a global community of companies and organizations working together to accelerate and develop and deploy Open RAN and open and disaggregated solutions, but all based on global standards, global open standards. And the reason why we think those things are important is that we need to deliver both high quality connectivity where it's needed, whether that is emerging markets, developing world, or developed world, urban, rural, and everything else in between. We think that disaggregated networks give businesses and enterprises and countries the ability to be present on a global stage now and in the future. And that is increasingly underlined and highlighted by the necessity that we've experienced through this COVID pandemic, and our ability to continue regardless of the circumstances needs to be improved. And the connectivity of things over the next number of years needs to be enhanced. Now, Scott's opening remarks did a great job and probably stole much of my thunder in terms of my opening remarks, in terms of feature parity, flexibility of networks, competition, price, a huge number of benefits that open disaggregated network infrastructure building and deploying brings not only to telcos themselves, but to adjacent industries, governments, and consumers and businesses alike. But one thing that I've been reminded of repeatedly over the last year is, yes, all of these things are absolutely true, but also we're describing the architecture of choice for the telecommunications industry. So when I speak to our members, our participants, I hear regularly, this is just right, this is just inevitable, and this is just the necessary architecture for transitioning into a future set of capabilities that will be leverageable by the telecommunications industry for benefits to everybody, including increased GDP. So look, in terms of what the Telecom Infra project does, we build, we test, we deploy, we facilitate collaboration between like-minded organizations and like-minded governments and countries in respect to accelerating the outcomes. So we've been on this mission for a good number of years now, I'd say a good 5 or 6 years. And it's wonderful to see an increased intent and interest from governments around the world, education, facilities, and universities. But essentially, the buying signal from the operator community is really kicking in. And Dilip, no doubt, I think we'll talk about that a little bit more on this panel. So I'm really happy to be here, and this is the right discussion to be having and the right time. So thanks for having me.
Much, Attilio. So next we'll hear from some actual company folks. We'll start with Eugenia from Parallel Wireless.
Thank you so much for having Parallel Wireless. And I'm going to be making a really brief introduction because I hope everyone knows who Parallel Wireless is by now. And I'm very grateful to the US government, the UK government, TIP, and many other companies, regulators, ecosystem partners that are driving with us this Open RAN initiative. So who we are? We are a US-based company, and we have offices in the UK, in the US, in Israel, and global sales offices across the globe. Our mission, just like many panelists before me, is very close to our heart, is to help to connect people all across the globe. And Open RAN is the technology that can do it. We're a software company, and we're probably the most deployed software new vendor in the world right now. And of course, many things goes to TIP that been with operator partners and encouraging them to trial out Open technology. And there was a Washington Post article last year talking about Open RAN technology as an alternative to other vendors. And we're working with the UK and European-based operators to drive open standards, to drive the ecosystem, and make sure mobile operators, they have a choice of what to deploy. Because as we all know, the supply market consolidated is all about innovation, bringing fresh blood like many other companies to help mobile operators bring coverage to more users. Thank you for having us here, and I'm looking forward to a great discussion.
Thank you, Gina. And last but not least, Michaela from Microsoft. The stage is.
Thank you very much. And again, appreciate the opportunity for having me and Microsoft on the panel. Thank you for all the introductions. It's a great time to be living in. And I don't say this lightly because I've been in telecom for all my life, but I have to say that the past few years have been amazing in terms of the intersection of telecom and IT and the beginning of an era in which the innovation that has been sort of a given in the enterprise space is now getting through the telecom space. And what that will mean is that the vendor diversity, the innovation, the ecosystem, a rich ecosystem and vibrant ecosystem will start developing in telecom as well, and will definitely end up in a better place for everybody, whether it's consumer, enterprises, governments, countries, and vendors like us. I don't want to say much about Microsoft because I hope most of you know that we have been involved in a lot of work for the betterment of everything from, trying to bridge the digital divide to initiatives like the Airband, in which we try to connect everybody on the planet in remote areas. So those things go without me diving deep into those. I just want to mention that from a Open RAN perspective, absolutely a fantastic way to democratize technology. But as Microsoft, it behoves me to say that while the Open RAN represents a huge step towards better technology and better architecture, the dependence on the cloud, it's going to be very important. And cloud brings certain things that are absolutely needed in the telecom space. One being security, which is something that it's on everybody's mind and will be addressed, I believe, later on this panel. With that, I just want to say again, thank you very much for having me and looking forward to the discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, Michaela. So the first question, we've talked about this a little bit, but some of the drivers behind Open RAN. We have two vendors on the panel today with Microsoft and Parallel Wireless, but we don't actually have any operators. But of course, Attilio, from the TIP perspective, operators are a huge part of the community. So can you just boil it down for us simply? If I'm an operator today, and I'm looking at making, my procurement decision, what is the driver that's prompting me to embrace Open RAN today?
Yeah, thanks. I'll do my best to speak for that category of our membership. The conversations that I have with the operator community range from CEOs and CTOs right through to those delivering country level deployments in markets. And all of them, without fail, say, I need a network that can do what I want it to do because I know what my network should be able to achieve my customers. And that ideology sounds super simple, but in other phraseology, it's a matter of saying, I've got some requirements. I want my network to do some stuff. And I know what those things are. Please, vendor community, respond to my requirements in a way that gives me best-in-class solutions from best-in-class technologists, hardware and software, the most innovative capabilities. And that's not to say the vendors who have consolidated over the last 15 years haven't been innovative. They absolutely have. They've taken us a very long way to get to the state that we're in today, which is good, right? We can have this conversation, and it's telecommunications facilitating it in a pretty rich and capable way. But to go through to the future and to believe that we can actually make a request of the industry that might be the best in security. I might have efficiency priorities in my particular network. I might have peculiarities of spectrum allocation in my country. They have real needs. They might even want something super light that can go up a pole in a rural area, right? So these specific requirements need to be met. And yes, they're being met by incumbent vendors, but not necessarily with the level of innovation and with the best-in-class capabilities that are represented in a broader supply chain. So yes, resilience is key, cost is key, but ultimately that architecture of choice that helps them facilitate the responsiveness to demand of IoT and adjacent industry requirements, from automotive to transportation, corridors across the world that need to be facilitated in network slicing. All of these things are really, really important to operators, and they want to believe that they, at every level, that they can say what they want and get what they want from a broader supply chain of vendors. To me, it's as simple as that.
Right. And of course, from the vendor perspective, we've talked about this a little bit, but I don't think it was surprised if I said, 5 years ago, maybe not a lot of people would have known about parallel wireless, but now everyone in the Open RAN space knows who parallel wireless is. And of course, people wouldn't think of Microsoft as a traditional network infrastructure company, right? But these are new opportunities that are being created. So Eugenia, starting with you, what opportunities is this technology creating, especially for a company like yours?
So this is a great question, and I want to build on what was said before. The three things that we're seeing as opportunities is, number one, is choice. Parallel wireless wouldn't have existed if the industry was not open to receiving new vendors and being supportive. Number two is innovation. Though other vendors in the space, they are innovating. They're innovating into the future. They're innovating on 4G and 5G. So the legacy networks that are still important in the rest of the world, they're still not Open RAN based. So creating software like parallel wireless has created that covers legacy 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G, all under the same software umbrella, is the innovation that the industry has been looking for. And what is interesting, for many regions where connectivity is super important, they might skip 3G and 4G. They might deploy 2G today and then go directly to 5G with Open RAN technology, because it's cloud-based, cloud-native, it's software-defined. In the US and developed markets, and in the UK, again, Open RAN offers the ability to mix and match vendors, components, use COTS equipment. And then the third one, and this is where Open RAN is moving to, because now hardware and software have been disaggregated. So what the industry, Open RAN industry, is working on is to how integrate and automate those components. And this is where automation comes in with CI/CD to deliver the software, and AI and ML to remove any type of manual tasks to optimize the networks. So this is what we're seeing as parallel wireless, as the startup, as a new vendor, as opportunities for the industry to innovate, give choices, and automate to connect more people.
Michaela?
Yes, thank you. And Eugenia already stole some of my thunder on AI and ML, obviously. I do have to say that I think one of the opportunities that we are seeing is that the same way 4G has brought a lot of value to the consumer space, 5G will provide a lot of value to the enterprise space. And whether it's through operators or through private networks, 5G will unlock the promise of the 5G. It's to unlock all these use cases in which we are already seeing tremendous value. So let's talk about, for instance, we have been participating in a real deployment for AgTech in Snohomish County in Washington State, in which sensors provide the real-time data to the farmers, something that previously has not been possible. So this is a very good example of an application that will help everybody. As I said previously, it's something that gives a win-win-win solution to the farmers, to the government, to us, to everybody involved, as well as all the partners involved, goes without saying. So that's one of the opportunities, or several of the opportunities that we are seeing, and we'll be talking a little bit more about what we have learned from some of these cases. The other opportunity that we are seeing, and to be honest, we see that a necessity, in fact, for a feasible deployment is the needs for edge compute more and more, and for secure edge compute, as I mentioned previously. And I think that's something that we are very well positioned. In fact, we have just announced a few things yesterday in a big event. I would like everybody to feel free to go and check it out. But it's all about mobile edge compute and how we can help there. And I guess thirdly, I want to raise a challenge as well, because it's all about opportunities, but solving some challenges. And while we talked about security, I would like to say, look, there are many things that people say about Open RAN, whether it's, for instance, energy efficient, and that it's a challenge that we should be taking on and prove that it's actually going to be more energy efficient and will improve sustainability in the long run. And that is also an opportunity for us, not only a challenge. And with that, I'll turn back to you, Doug.
Thanks. And just, to close up on drivers of Open RAN here, Scott and Tom, of course, governments are taking a much more active in 5G technology and Open RAN. What's really driving that? And we've sort of heard from you both a little bit, but maybe just sharpen in on why is government so focused on this right now? Scott, maybe we'll start with you.
Thanks. And actually, sort of loads of stuff that other people have said with which I strongly agree. I guess we've always taken a close interest in 5G from the UK government's perspective. We see the kind of massive potential benefit that it brings to UK citizens and to customers and consumers and enterprise. And it's, really the bedrock, I guess, of the sort of digital transformation that the government wants to see. I suppose sort of why a particular interest in Open RAN. I mean, I set out the context from our diversification strategy and the work that we've done to understand some of the risks that we face. And I think, why we're taking a particular interest is, I think there is a role for governments to place to sort of help to de-risk some of the sort of investment that needs to be made. There are remaining kind of technical challenges that other people have kind of alluded to, and sort of I think there is a role for government to play there. And actually, it's also why it's so great that in the UK we've got Ofcom, our regulator, involved in one of our projects already. So, how do we understand as the technology is being built, kind of what that means for us as we build a policy framework and a regulatory framework. So we think there's a need for governments to be involved in pushing this, because there are so many, there are some really legitimate questions that we all need to kind of work through. And I think governments can help a lot with that, as I say, with kind of funding the R&D, thinking about best practice for designing policy and regulation.
At risk of repeating what Scott said, from the U.S. government's perspective, we share common interest with the UK on this. In the United States, we're particularly interested in we have a national strategy to secure 5G, which anyone online can Google and find the 200-line implementation plan, which talks about all the activities and the reasons why the United States government is working on a number of levels of the 5G ecosystem, one of which is vendor diversity. But a lot of it is regard to engaging the international community on the responsible global deployment of 5G. And so I would just encourage that there's a wealth of information that we've already published in our national strategy that is open for everyone to read. In particular, it's not a surprise that there are concerns that the U.S. and other governments have articulated about in terms of concerns about elements of the telecommunications supply chain. That really stems from two considerations. One, which has to do with whether or not there's a fundamental level of trust with regard to the underlying vendor of the equipment. Is that vendor subject to rule of law compliance or expectations that we would normally expect to see in countries that are based in rule of law countries? In addition, though, another reason that's driving U.S. government's interest in Open RAN is also the fact that our policy towards the internet for 20 odd years has been to promote open, interoperable, reliable, and secure internet. We call it a free and open internet for short, but that interoperability and reliability and the core values of competition, choice, and diversity really do lie at the core of what the United States government's policies towards the internet and mobile technology have been for 2 decades. And Open RAN really is a manifestation of that. So even if we did not have some of those underlying concerns about the identity of particular vendors in the community, we would still be interested in Open RAN technology because opening up interfaces, allowing for more competition and choice, allowing for interoperability between network services and equipment is really the direction that the internet was some of the founding principles of the internet originally that we think would be very much advanced by its wider adoption throughout the mobile industry.
Attilio, could you just give us a little bit of a sketch on where Open RAN is deploying around the world, since I think Tip has good insight into some of this?
I think we're in a little bit of danger of furiously agreeing with each other on every point. And I think it's important to note that we're using the phraseology of Open RAN. In some cases, I think we're using it as a proxy for open networking and open and interoperable networks, as you rightly say, Tom. So I think we need to be a little bit careful about focusing in on one component of the network, albeit a very important and challenging component to get right globally. So the way that we look at this really importantly is radio access network, transport, or some people call it backhaul, and core network, which is increasingly becoming distributed core, cloud core, the edge core of the network. And this is both hardware and software in all areas of this. So we count a lot of deployments across the world, the operator and vendor community-led activities to solve interoperable, interchangeable solution. And then we run community labs around the world. There are 14 hosted by our community with over 50 field trials of products and solutions. When we talk about solutions, we talk about splicing together those components of radio access network, transport, and core, and startup communities around the world. And we think that's an important component of the open end funnel to deployable solutions that come out of the end. And this is wonderful. Not only the comments, but the motives of the governments who are participating, from Indonesia, who isn't present today, but are making great strides to becoming a digital powerhouse as their stated goal in Southeast Asia, through to Scott's comments about the involvement, both DCMS and also Ofcom, and Tom's comments as well. It's astounding. There is no stopping open networking, right? Let's put that to bed. It's just a matter of how can we work collectively in a sustained and concerted effort together collaboratively. And that's the way we work in TIP, right? Bringing together Ofcom's Sonic program and the activities from USAID and from our members, all meeting requirements that are stated by the operator community and other communities around the world. So look, so I can't give you a number, Dilip, because it will be wrong within a few clicks of the finger. It's rapidly increasing.
Thanks. And we've talked about, a lot of the about Open RAN so far, but we also, of course, there may be challenges and lessons learned. So I thought I'd go to our vendors, Eugenia and Michaela, and say, what are some of the lessons learned so far, maybe especially in developing countries?
I can start. We have quite a few developments, both in developing as well as developed countries. And I think the challenges or the lessons learned are equal across the type of country that you deploy the solution in. So one of the lessons learned was that there is a high cost and complexity in integration and management of these networks, including an Open RAN. And I'm not talking only about the Open RAN, but any of this, for 5G. So bringing all these components from different vendors, it's a little bit of a challenge. I would also say that we've learned that small footprint infrastructure, it's absolutely critical for specific deployments like enterprise deployments. Reliable IoT apps, we learned that are really primary drivers for this type of solution, for as we have seen. Today, many apps are being custom developed for each use case. And I think it's very important to create an environment in which these applications can be brought to life very fast and very easy, but that can be a challenge. And finally, I want to say that really this is an ecosystem play. I think everybody recognizes that there is no single player that can do it all. So, whether it's the operator who holds the spectrum or the customer relationships or the SI who does the integration, they all must come together to really partner for a fully end-to-end workable, reliable, as well as economically viable solution.
Eugenia?
So I stole Michaela's thunder and she stole mine on the ecosystem. What we're seeing is the new ecosystem is forming, vendors, customers. When you have more choice, then you collaborate so much better. I'm going to disagree respectfully with Michaela on that Open RAN is so much harder to integrate. And when blueprints are created, like TIP has been creating blueprints, or an alliance been creating blueprints here in the US, then those ones can be deployed and integrated quite easily. And we have some of the examples. I'm going to give my company a little plug here, where the largest network, Open RAN network in Peru, which is IPT, Internet Parrot Orders, was deployed under a year. And the reason it's happening, as I mentioned, because of the blueprints, number one, and number two is the automation. So when you start implementing DevOps principles with automation, then those deployments can roll out faster. And I think the biggest challenge that we had as a vendor, I'm going to use Steve Jobs' quote here, that at first we were thought as crazy when we were going to our customers. And look, 5, 6, 7, 8 years later, the ones that were thought of being crazy, now the whole industry is changing the telecom.
So looks like Tom and Michaela both want to jump in. Michaela, why don't I let you go first?
Thank you very much. I just want to say that I didn't say it's very, very hard to the system integration, but I do want to say that, people are not looking at a year deployment anymore. With IT coming fast and furious to the telecom world, I think the telecom timeframes that usually have been a year, 2 years in terms of deployments are going to be a thing of the past. And what I'm talking about, it's doing something in terms of, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks to deploy actually a network. And again, from experience that we have developed in doing these solutions in several places, it is a little bit of a system integration complexity. And as I said, it's not only about Open RAN, it's about bringing a rich ecosystem to the table to actually fulfill that particular need for those particular specific applications that whether the enterprise or the government wants. So just wanted to clarify that and sort of highlight the fact that we need to move very fast. Thank you.
100% in agreement, 100%. And we're seeing that progressing as well. So yes, thank you so much for clarifying.
Tom?
Yeah, and a quick point I'd like to make on this system integration challenge or point is it's essentially, we're focusing in on developing countries, and we've studied where the Open RAN industry is in certain countries, and just kind of noting that there is a wide variety of difference in terms of capacity and capabilities of the workforce in a country like Peru compared to a country like Malawi or Mozambique. And we're seeing interest in Open RAN deployments in all of these countries. But I think the kind of fundamental challenge, but also significant opportunities that it presents to the local ecosystem is finding local workforce that can do this work. But also that is part of, in many ways, our selling point to countries and to the participants in the ecosystem in countries like Mozambique, Malawi, Liberia. is to really say that, Open RAN, because it's a competitive and open space, and the interoperability does allow for the genesis of local growth in technology skills and specialized integration firms that might really specialize in, deployments in the outer counties in Kenya that otherwise we would not necessarily see through the traditional vertically integrated approach. So it's both a challenge and an opportunity.
Scott, I just want to give you a chance to get in on this. We've been talking about systems integration and the importance of that, but also just kind of maybe leaving developing countries aside for a moment. What are we seeing in the UK? What are we seeing in Europe in terms of companies generally, or maybe the systems integration process there?
Thanks. And I thought actually I might just refer back to a point Attilio made. Having tried to create some sort of competitive tension, I'm then going to violently agree with him again. But he made the point about sort of being, when we talk about Open RAN, do we actually mean open and interoperable networks? And I think that's actually a really good point. And there's a sort of a line that's easily missed in my strategy that says, we're looking at the RAN at the moment because that's from the UK's perspective where we see the kind of greatest risks from critical national dependence. But actually, we need to kind of keep a weather eye out for other sort of domains and functions actually as the network evolves where we might sort of face similar issues. So, I've been doing this job for 8 months and I discover that sort of telecoms diversification is a job for life, not just for a few years. So sorry, Attilio, I know you tried to create some tension there, but actually going to agree with you. And I think, it's really interesting to hear the perspective of what's happening in developing countries. I think actually we're seeing huge amounts of enthusiasm in both the UK and Europe. There were 4 operators, I think, big European operators who've signed a memorandum of understanding about how they want to work together to develop Open RAN. We have really, really positive engagement with all of our operators here in the UK. Obviously, I can answer this question even more definitively. As I mentioned in my speech, we're delighted with Vodafone's announcement earlier in this week about how they're approaching their initial Open RAN deployment of 2,500 sites. I think sort of some of the challenges or some of the differences maybe are around we're often talking about brownfield networks and how do we deploy on top of those. And therefore there's sort of different challenges, both technical and commercial, associated with sort of some of the deployment decisions that we're seeing with UK operators here and indeed European operators. And that's why I think sort of some of the barriers that I talked about, so what do we do about 2G and 3G networks, for example, are really important and something that kind of we're working really closely with our operators here in the UK to understand sort of what is the best approach there. So I think we're seeing lots of enthusiasm, but there are sort of different challenges perhaps in the UK and Europe than elsewhere.
Thanks. Attilio, I saw you maybe wanted to chime in on this briefly.
Yeah, a couple of great points. Look, Tom, in essence, you're defining what globalization really means, which is enabling other countries around the world to actually close their skills gap, create engineering capabilities, leverage open standards and the outputs of organizations like TIP and the ORAN Alliance to actually develop, deploy, maybe even eventually create and support greater connectivity in their own countries as well as others in their regions, supported by the approach. Wonderful, wonderful kind of definition for me of what true globalization means. And Scott, job for life. Yeah, look, telecommunications has come a long way and it's got a very, very, very long way to go until the promises of Jean-Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise are enabled by our networks when we want to use the replicator to make a in-and-out burger that I'd really love to have from the West Coast that I just can't get. Look, there's a long way to go and there's so much continuous delivery, both on a micro scale and solutioning, but also on a macro scale of making sure that we're setting the exam questions collectively. So my call to governments, my call to the operator community like the Open RAN MOU group of the 5 European operators is to continuously work together, increasingly closer to set those requirements that we know we should be calling the transportation industry, we should be calling airlines, we should be calling those customers of our networks and understanding what their requirements are collectively, both from a government perspective. Operators already do it, right? That knowledge and insight in setting their requirements of the vendor community as well. So look, things are coming together really beautifully. And I think we just need to keep going on this collective approach. And yeah, it's a job for life. We will still be doing this in 20, 30 years time on this new paradigm of open networking. I'm super excited about this, and you can probably tell I love this conversation. I just want it to continue.
I just wanted to jump in for 1 second, because as much as I like everything that's happening, I just don't want people to think that we are living in a utopia, right land. Things are not as peachy as perhaps we are presenting. There is a lot more cooperation. There is a lot more openness to networks, but we have a very long road to go, and we have to learn to crawl and walk before running. And I think we have many challenges to overcome, including in, starting with US and UK and developed countries, in which we can really ask governments to help more push perhaps their contribution to standards, to facilitating more test beds, to facilitating additional vendors to come in and prove certain applications. Things that have been done to some extent, and we are seeing this more and more, but there is always room for a little bit more. So just wanted to say that we need to bring a little bit more realism. Thank you.
Yeah.
Michaela, since you brought up some of the challenges, I thought, maybe let Eugenia tackle that one. There's some, you can call them challenges. Some people would say they're myths about Open RAN. People say it's less secure, it's less energy efficient, that it costs more than traditional solutions. Eugenia, what do you think of those things?
So there's also another term, FUD, right? So look, it's a new technology. It's an unknown technology. Unknown is always scary. And people are taking the leap of faith, and they're trying new technologies, and they're figuring out that when technologies are software-based, they're more secure, because any type of traditional architecture is very monolithic, right? And it comes from one vendor. So it's very easy to hack into that system. Open implements two very important security aspects. Number one, it's modular. So it's very hard to hack into many modular components. And number two, which I love, it's zero trust. So the software is being developed and implemented with zero trust. So, and it is important to know that those concerns are being addressed. And the second one is the cost. When it comes from one vendor, customers, mobile operators, they have very little room to negotiate. And also for every G, for 4G or 5G, 6G, 7G, with any traditional technology, you would have to rip and replace. So your investment goes out the door. With Open RAN or software-based approach, you get more choice how to invest and how to extend your investments. You can mix and match components. You leave your radio on the tower. Your cost is being reduced because you don't have to send people on site to replace. The only thing you change is the software. And secondly, the OpEx is being reduced by, again, and I keep repeating myself, with automation, AI, ML. So instead of optimizing with engineers on site, it works like magic. I'm in marketing, so I love the technology, and to me, it's all like magic. So AI and ML with ORAN Alliance RIG components is able to optimize from the data center. So what people need to realize is new technology, the ecosystem is evolving, and they're addressing those concerns to make sure mobile operators feel good about what they are deploying.
And of course, Michaela, a lot of that new technology and new software is moving. I mean, the network topology is changing as we're moving things into the cloud. And so that's where Microsoft comes in. So how does cloud and cloud native approaches affect all of these questions?
So first of all, I think there are no, and this is me talking, not Microsoft, I want to say that there are no myths, there are just interests. And whether one interest pushes one view versus another interest pushing other view, it's just interesting. But as Attilio said before, this train has left the station and we are moving towards openness. So cloud, it's an integral part of the 5G, next G solution. I think we bring a lot of trust that we have built along the years in terms of deploying cloud solutions and technology that has been deployed now for many years that has proven to be more secure. Now, having said that, I just want to say, look, like as Eugenia said, technology is new, and she mentioned that having a modular design means harder hacking. Somebody else may say, look, having a modular or many modules will create a higher attack surface, for instance. Therefore, the security is going to be harder to reach. So there are always different sides of the balance, and we have to move forward, because with any technology, new technology, these challenges will be met eventually, again, given a very, very rich ecosystem in which many people come together and contribute, like, for instance, open source, right? Open source, it's a great way to bring more value, and many people may say, look, it's perhaps less secure. We would say it's more secure. In the end, it's just a matter of really figuring out, testing, having some certifications, and this is something that we are looking in Europe. There is movement towards that. UK is doing that. So this is something that we would be very happy to see.
Just moving on to another topic, I thought I wanted to address the elephant in the room, so to speak, which is China. We know the strong presence of Huawei and ZTE in the marketplace, and China, subsidizing those companies as well. That makes it hard for companies to compete. So what are the challenges, I guess, that the China situation is creating? Why should other countries, adopt the ORAN approach instead? Tom, I know it's a tricky question, but I'd be curious to see if you're willing to go first and chime in on this.
Sure, I can go first, although I'm interested in what the companies are facing in the competitive playing field. But as you noted, in particular, one of the main concerns that the United States government has about the current status of the 5G ecosystem are questions about the reliability and security of the equipment that is being offered and sold by certain Chinese vendors. And a lot of that stems not from an assessment as to, it just doesn't work as well as promised, but more from the standpoint of China's National Security Act and requirements that those companies will be required, on the order of the government, to turn over information about that network and how it operates and what the user is using on that network. That's kind of immutable. As long as that law is there, that is going to be a challenge to the supply chain in many ways, like I said, regardless of the technology itself. What we are concerned about at USAID is a broader question about the Digital Silk Road initiative that China has sponsored, as well as the Belt and Road kind of umbrella that under which Digital Silk Road resides, which is the interlocking between state-sponsored debt and purchasing of network equipment on a national or a wholesale or retail basis, and creating a form of debt diplomacy and effectively vendor lock-in. We see in certain countries where there may have been a loan 5 or 6 years ago to build a 3G network. No payments were required for 10 years on effective and important parts of that 3G network. And now currently seeing offers to renegotiate that now that the bill is becoming due to countries or to providers in those countries to renegotiate those terms to essentially say put in the new equipment. In many ways, I cut my teeth in this industry in the 90s in the competitive local exchange industry, and we used to criticize our competitors at the time of saying that their strategy for tomorrow is to make today last. And I do think that we're actually seeing elements of that with regard to the kind of insistence of sticking with these vertically integrated network services that integrate services on software and the hardware together. I think we're seeing that the use of this type of debt diplomacy, which in many countries can become a debt trap, is a way of maintaining an existing market position and expanding it. So Open RAN, we think, is an important part of the solution. It's not the only component of the solution, but I think it's important to be able to offer the ecosystem alternative to developing countries, in particular, to say that, engaging with China on this technology, yes, in theory, it might actually get you a network upgrade cheaper on the initial capital expense basis. That upgrade will do very little for your overall ecosystem and your overall economic growth, development of your technology sector. And in the long run, probably results in higher total cost of ownership as well for the provider. So with that, I'll just turn it back to the providers, because I'd like to hear and understand what challenges they directly face in the field in terms of trying to make sales.
Leo or Michaela, do either of you want to jump on this one?
I will just say that what I think with all these activities around the risk vendors, while there is it's easy to look at perhaps the negative aspects versus the positive aspect. I wish to look perhaps on the more positive aspect of the fact that this really brought something that I've never seen before in terms of desire to innovate and desire to open things and create more diverse ecosystem. Going back to the same word, but I think it sort of accelerated the desire to come together and create alliances that perhaps were lingering or not necessarily trusting so much before, and rekindled that trust between countries similar in terms of political and geopolitical views. And I think that's a great thing to do, despite all the other things that are happening in terms of trading and things like that. So I just wanted to add that there is something to be gained from this.
Nina, any thoughts on that?
Kayla and I would think so much alike. So we do know that China has very deep pockets, right? And we understand why they trying to implement Plan China 2025. So it is very concerning. And I'm 100% in agreement with Michaela. It's turning into different industries, developing innovative solutions so much faster. And we are very happy that it's happening, and governments are now supporting this innovation. There's so much support we're seeing across the board. And I'm personally happy that we are turning it into something great for the mankind.
Would welcome to see if you have any thoughts on the China issue, or if not, maybe transition us to our last topic, which is, what more could governments be doing to help promote Open RAN around the world, especially in the developing world where there is this competition?
Let me start in China, bridge across. Look, so for me, it's not a debate about nations. It's a debate about monolithic and closed and locked in versus collaborative, open as an ideology. And the way that we deal with it in a telecom infra project is we say that we build in the open, right? So this is another component of security. So zero trust, absolutely. Modular approaches, absolutely right. These are going to enhance security capabilities of networks. And we're learning in the telecoms industry from IT and data center technologies. But for me, the additional component of that is build in collaboration with other organizations based on requirements. And then importantly, test it out, right? Put it in a lab, put it in a field, test the efficiency, the security, the capabilities of those pieces of equipment based on the requirements of the community of operators and other interested parties. So we need to build confidence in the marketplace, ultimately. Will companies who are taking a monolithic approach eventually want to join and participate in this build in the open ideology? Yeah, I think so eventually. But it's a long road for them with different business models. So we love it when Parallel Wireless participates in our Plugfest tests and trials, as well as many others from across the world. So we've got to build collectively. Now, in terms of what governments can do additionally, I think I've already stated it. I think it's very simple. I think it's what Tom is talking about and what Scott is talking about. Get on and push, right? And whether that's with making it easier for operators from a regulatory perspective to test and trial things in live networks, maybe using government facilities as test beds, post offices across the entire USA or the UK or other markets being utilized as willing locations for testing and trialing out new solutions with vendors like Parallel Wireless and many others, or whether it's stimulus in terms of finances to encourage buy-side funding or creating new companies out of startups in amazing universities that we have across the world. Look, all of these things, right? And again, it's a matter of recognizing what the exam question is, setting it in a smart way and in a collective way, and then solving within an environment that enables that kind of build in the open ideology. Test it, validate it, and then buy it at scale. Michaela, I think you're right. Sometimes I do look through somewhat rose-tinted glasses and I look to the future. Yes, you're absolutely right. There's a long, long way to go. And there is a lot of testing, validating, hardening solutions, hardening products innovating and failing, improving, right? But we need to do that in a faster way, right, and in a more open and visible way. Because if we do it in isolation from each other, we'll all get a part of the answer, and then we'll go ta-da, and it won't work, right? So we've got to do this collaboratively. And I'm going to do a shameless plug. Eugenia, you've given me license. I feel the place to do that is in the Telecom Infra project, right? That's what the industry set up as a mechanism. So my company, it's a collaboration. It's a facility designed by the industry for the industry to do all these things that I'm saying. Join in.
Great, thanks, Attilio. Sort of briefly, Eugenia and Michaela, maybe if you could just sort of say, from your perspective, what else do you think government could be doing? And then I'll finish with Scott and Tom to sort of say, what do the government folks need from the industry side? So Eugenia, do you want to take that?
TIP is a great organization. I'm going to give you a plug as well. We love being part of TIP because the collaborative environment is just so wonderful. So we're already working with the UK government and US governments across many different projects. So they just need to do more, right? And I don't want to sound greedy, but we have a few projects we're working in Africa with. So let's work on more. And this is, I think, what the governments are doing is great. Just do more.
Terrific. Michaela?
Yes, I would like to say that, I think governments definitely can help, and we are working with a lot of government agencies around the world, and we love what we are seeing in terms of willingness to participate. We would like to see perhaps, encouraging industry-wide certification or regional certifications or things that make it easier for all ecosystem to participate, right, as opposed to country by country specific, very different requirements, let's say. I think it's very important to adopt technology neutral policies. To be fair, I don't think we want to see, or the operators want to see, certain impositions on them. I would like to say that the UK and US are perfect examples of great spectrum strategies, but that's not the same way around the world. And we would love to see cooperation and perhaps helping in the developing countries to promote similar spectrum strategies. And just to finish up, as Attilio said, really supporting research and development, including tests and plug tests, and partnering with the industry would be great to see. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe, Scott, I'll start with you. What is government looking for from industry to help all of this move forward?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's just more of the same, really. So, Attilio talked about getting involved. That's what we're seeing in the UK to a huge extent. And I sort of think, get involved, continue to collaborate with us, and I guess sort of just finally tell us what the barriers are, like what are the policy and regulatory barriers that you're facing. I mean, we get that a lot in the UK. We're really grateful for it, but it helps us to kind of understand what are the practical barriers that industry are facing, and how can government help, whether that's in funding projects or sort of tackling policy or regulatory things. So I think it's largely sort of more of the same, but very much kind of, as Attilio said, kind of getting involved and working in collaboration.
Great. And Tom?
Yes, I agree on all those points. And from the developing countries perspective, I speak with a lot of these countries frequently. One thing I would kind of encourage the industry to look about or think about is to, in a way, kind of like walk in the shoes a bit of the Ministry of Telecommunications or the Minister of ICT in a developing country. They're not thinking about 5G. They're not thinking about how do I upgrade our network. What they're thinking about is generally, how do I develop a vibrant digital economy that, frankly, that the pandemic has exposed the challenges that countries that don't have sufficient connectivity or domestic workforce, the challenges they face. And I do think that it's important to keep the phrasing of the discussion of Open RAN not simply as this is a better technology for your wireless network, et cetera, but to really start to make sure that we keep framing it in the context of this is how it will help your country develop its digital ecosystem moving forward. I'm not faulting the industry for that, but I do think it's important that we don't get locked into thinking about our engagement with countries solely looking at how they're upgrading their wireless networks. Because maybe the biggest challenge to Open RAN deployment might be the fact that there is no independent internet exchange point in the country. right? And so what's the point of interoperability in the RAN if there's no interoperability in the core? And so I think trying to engage governments on all of those topics and making sure that that you understand that the governments are trying to improve all aspects of their digital economy, I think is something that I think would be really beneficial and certainly help reinforce the message that USAID and other development agencies take to these countries as well.
Get in a few questions. I think this first one is good for Scott. Maybe Tom wants to touch it briefly too. This week, the UK published a report on tech competitiveness. One challenge they highlighted was a human capital shortage in tech. Will a lack of tech skills in the workforce hinder Open RAN deployment?
So yes, I mean, I think the question of sort of tech skills is one for colleagues across my department, not just in the telecom sector. I mean, I think on a sort of day-to-day basis, it's something that we obviously talk to our operators about a lot as a sort of resilience risk or requirement. How do we make sure that we have the right skills to manage and maintain networks in the UK? And then I guess looking forward, it's something that was highlighted to us by the task force that I mentioned, sort of how do we building a UK ecosystem and more UK capability, kind of what comes with that is more skills actually in the UK. And I think, that's good for government. That's actually good for our operators because they have the confidence that the people are actually there who are going to be able to do the work and test these things out. So I think it's a sort of virtuous circle, but yeah, absolutely something that we're very aware of.
Here's a sort of related question. Tom, maybe I think this is a good one for you. How do you see it feasible to deploy 5G ecosystems in developing countries and communities, persons, while the user terminal cost is so high that makes real access a little bit unreal? I think this is about a device cost issue in developing countries.
Well, certainly affordability of internet is a key input to any vibrant ecosystem. In fact, other projects that USAID works on, working with organizations such as the Alliance for Affordable Internet and the Web Foundation, are really focusing in on driving down at least those per megabyte user costs. So this gets to the point I actually just incidentally made, which is like posing the question as making a choice about your 5G ecosystem is maybe the wrong way to phrase the question. The question is to talk about your internet ecosystem or your digital economy ecosystem, of which 5G and advanced wireless services are a component, but you also need to be thinking about, do we have data centers in this country? Do we have internet exchange points that lower the cost of international circuits for IP traffic? What are the costs of backhaul, which is usually a significant variable cost in rural areas? In addition to what policies do we have about user terminals? I think from the standpoint of just the sheer economics of the wireless industry, those things tend to play out. I think as when we achieve scale economies and Open RAN deployments, I think the per unit cost of that hardware will decrease over time. That might be an area for a government to try to legitimately push it forward. But I think making sure that we engage on all of these issues, and that Open RAN is part of that solution, but isn't. I agree with the question. Is like isn't the only part of the solution.
I have one more technical. There's a technical question here, probably for our industry guys, or maybe for Attilio, on the interoperability issue. How do you see this integrating with other wireless protocols like Wi-Fi, et cetera, to create a seamless user experience? It's sort of a 5G Open RAN question. Michaela or maybe Eugenia want to tackle that one?
I would hope Attilio to come first, and then I can provide a little bit of our philosophy on interoperability with Wi-Fi and other protocols. Obviously, from an industry perspective, we would love to see a seamless experience. I think, again, as anything new, it will this has nothing to do with Open RAN in particular. It has to do with, cellular versus other protocols. So you're talking cellular with Wi-Fi. There is interworking there. There is more that can be done. There are many technologies that are equally viable and help each other. So it's not a discussion of one versus the other. It's how we bring them together and create a better experience for the consumer or the enterprise. So Attilio is back. I will give it to him to complete the answer.
Yeah, thanks, Michaela. Look, I've got our answer, and it's, again, I'm going to hark back to the requirements and the demand signal from the operator community. Wi-Fi we've recently set up a project group that was initiated by a number of our members who are keen to see how to validate and integrate Wi-Fi into the mix of radio technologies. No doubt millimeter wave and others will come in the future as well, and we're ready to understand and test and solidify the capabilities. 5G and beyond is going to be a mix of radio technologies. Simple. We need to make sure that we're ready for those. We need to get in labs, test, play with stuff, break it, fix it, make it better, then take that to the field. It's the same process. So for me, all of these things need to be recognized based on what the operator community and the broader community want from their network capabilities. We know that there's going to be an element of millimeter wave offload in downtown Bank Station in central London that won't necessarily require sub-6 radio, right? So we need to recognize all of these requirements and splice these technologies together as best we can.
Well, great. So it is the end of our 90 minutes. So I wanted to thank all of our panelists for joining us today, and Scott also for giving his opening remarks on behalf of the UK government. I think it was really insightful, and it gave us some great perspective on the promising future and the current reality of Open RAN, and looking forward from there. On behalf of Access Partnership, I wanted to say thank you, and I did want to let everyone know that this is day 4 of our week-long FairTech Forum virtual series of events. There is another panel session that starts in 30 minutes from now. It's called Don't Break It Before You Make It, the economic benefits of regulatory compliance. So I hope that folks would consider also coming back after a 30-minute break and maybe checking that one out on a different topic if you're interested. But with that, I think we'll say thanks to everyone once again for doing this, and have a good afternoon or evening wherever you happen to be located. Thank you.